We are back in action finally with Starship version 3 hardware out for testing, and we've got some great news on all that, especially when we include all the new build work that we've also seen this week. SpaceX also shocked us with an announcement that even makes the Starlink constellation look small, all while having a hiccup with Falcon 9. That wasn't the only hiccup either with Artemis II trouble, but we've got so much to jump into today, so I won't spoil it all. Let's get stuck into it.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
Hey, Marcus House with you here, and it has been an exciting week with the first version 3 vehicle finally out for testing. Spoiler, nothing has popped this time, so it has been a very positive week of progress for Booster 19. This is SpaceX's first third generation Super Heavy to, we hope, see flight here in a few weeks' time, but this was first heading off to Massey's. On Saturday, soon after our video went live last week, the team could be seen moving the booster lifting jib around and into Mega Bay 1. Just like clockwork, the booster thrust simulator was rolled in behind it. The door was then closed, but when it was reopened a few hours later, there was Booster 19 in the front of the bay before being rolled out and temporarily being stored in the ring yard until the 12 AM road closure. Sean was of course already positioned right there, geared up to capture it as it rolled by. Just look at the intricate detail that we can see in the version 3 aft section. These quick disconnect ports look very different to what we were used to seeing with the old version 2 design. As always, we can't thank you enough for being here watching along, because you are quite literally giving us the ability to be out here. Even though Sean has watched many of these Super Heavy boosters pass by now, it is still a staggering thing for him to be seeing it rolling right by. In fact, it still seems kind of bizarre that we can still get this close to the action, to be honest. Thank you, everyone. Anyway, this had soon rolled all the way to the Massey site to begin its pre-flight testing campaign. Beautiful shots shared by SpaceX on Sunday as it was set up in this station. We don't often get to see the site in this detail, so it's great to witness the awesome work that has gone into upgrading the site here. A gorgeous full moon behind there as we started to count down to the first big testing. They really had the artistic flair going on here, so to the media team that put this glorious video together, bravo! They had the slow-mo drone magic on point and even got this neat shot of the new ship test structure that we've been watching over here for the last month. It really is a beautiful location here, and I just can't wait to see the first version 3 ship coming soon using the upgraded tank farm and the flame trench to bellow out that raptor fire once again. Now, after that previous Super Heavy 18 incident, we were all a little jumpy as we began to watch the testing kick off. Booster 19 began to pulse its methane tank vents for the first time, as we could see thanks to the NSF live cameras always watching. After hours of similar looking testing that the Booster 18 previously failed to pass, Booster 19 was already ahead. Workers did later hook up and remove a single strake cover piece, but it looks like that they were just inspecting this out of extra caution because it was shortly covered back up in the morning. By that afternoon, they were already filling it with cryogenic fluid, so this was indeed the first time that a cryogenic test had been done on a version 3 booster. The liquid oxygen tank was filled to roughly 5 rings in height, and with the condensation up here on the methane tank, they had likely at least filled the gigantic Falcon 9 sized transfer tube right here all the way to the top, and potentially some of the common dome. That massive depress vent was the sign that this was the end of the testing for the day. It was detanked, and the frost melted over the next few hours. On Wednesday afternoon, all the way through to the next morning, they were back at it again, this time performing what looked to be a completely successful first full cryogenic test. As I was getting this video ready to export, they had been running another lengthy full cryogenic load entering into Saturday morning, so it's been an action-packed week for this vehicle. We aren't sure if they were utilising the thrust rams during all this first testing or not, so hopefully we'll know soon enough. Now, while we are at the Massey's test site, we can see that the mystery structure surrounding the static fire stand is getting forever more complex, and we can see a bunch of these triangular pieces now have been installed onto the ship-facing side. The B18.1 test article that has been tested around 17 times in the larger can crusher has this week had its cap removed, so they are likely done with this for now. SpaceX had mentioned previously that they had got this unit's thrust puck tested to 13,000 tons of force, which is well over double what the 33 Raptor engines can put out, so that's a great result. The much less successful B18.3 test tank though, which was supposed to be qualifying the hot stage truss, the forward dome connection points and much more, has been pulled apart. Thanks to this RGV aerial photography flight, we were able to see the new ring stands had rolled in appearing just to the side here. SpaceX began cutting the top 5 rings away with the hot stage truss included. This was then rolled back to the production site, but not immediately sent to the scrapyard. No, instead it turned towards the bays and was placed in the ring yard. It was then rolled into the Star Factory the next day, so it's possible that they will try to repurpose the upper half of this test tank and install a new aft. The crumpled bottom half was removed from the can crusher on Thursday, and we are yet to see what they'll do with that. I'm assuming that it will just be scrapped. Making our way back up the road though, we have great news for Flight 13, with both stages slated to fly during the launch, starting construction this week. Booster 20 started off with one of its upper liquid oxygen tank sections rolling into Mega Bay 1 on Thursday, which will first need to be lifted onto the turntable before they can lift the common dome section on top, which rolled in after the next day. This booster's partner, which is ship number 40, also began this week. We saw its Starlink satellite dispenser rolling out and into the factory, where it was lifted onto its sleeving stand. The nose cone was rolled the next day, and we got a tiny glimpse through the door as it was shut on us as it was being lifted over that dispenser hardware. The first thing we noticed during the lift was the new ablative design around the catch pins here. This has been extended to fill more of the space behind the pin, where we may see some turbulent flow. If you peek closely into the payload door, you'll see some COPVs in the back with their red protective jackets. This ship is also equipped with a set of docking ports like Ship 39. If that wasn't enough, the forward dome section for this ship was also rolled into Mega Bay 2 a few days later. It was hooked up to the nose cone section before the door was closed, and they continued the stacking process again, so we are well underway with that already. Okay, so if you've been watching over the past few weeks, you would recall us talking about the massive site expansion down here at Starbase. SpaceX, of course, had previously submitted requests to expand their footprint down at the launch site. Well, take a look at this. Early in the week, Sean spotted them placing multiple security trailers equipped with Starlink antennas and cameras. Rapidly, workers were already digging out the site outline exactly as proposed. This was to install this black silt fencing, which somewhat filters the groundwater and stops debris before it leaves the construction area. Just days later, they began with the first big step to remove the existing vegetation before they can start importing sand to fill the area. It is going to be an incredible thing seeing the full area of the site rapidly expand as we move through the year. If you look back at the site plan, they have a mountain of work here. Now, while at the launch site, at Pad 2, we had, as you may remember, seen SpaceX kick off testing for their detonation suppression system. Well, they replicated that same water test here on Monday afternoon, but soon after, we were seeing spurts of atomized water coming from one side of the trench, so the nitrogen gas system was now being introduced. They then performed what appeared to be the first full test of this system with all nozzles running. Now, that is the cloud of vapor that we were expecting to see. They tested this system 2 more times before calling it a day. At Pad 1 being rapidly upgraded, this week we can see the large concrete and steel reinforced pile cap has been laid and poured since our previous views from above, and it appears to have embeds for 4 tanks. 2 of these Sean had captured before and after their installation, so be on the lookout for an additional 2 tanks to arrive to fill the extra spaces during the next week or so. Across the road, the blistering speed of activity has continued along with the air separation unit. We had been awaiting this massive new part to be sent in, and indeed, here it was delivered and being almost immediately lifted in for installation. This is a massive component. It is the tallest and towers in at about 48 meters in height, so it's almost the height of an upper stage Starship, and it weighs in at a whopping 272 tons. This, we believe, is the cold box, and its job would be to split the collected commodities apart, whether that be the liquid nitrogen or liquid oxygen, to be sent off to their respective storage tanks. These air separation sites, remember, also tend to extract a little argon as a byproduct, but even that is plenty useful here with the welding operations always going on. Remember as well, Starlink satellites use argon thrusters, so perhaps they can even source that here as well. Now, as you know, NASA and the US Department of Energy are now officially planning to put a nuclear fission reactor on the moon by 2030. Not decades away, by 2030. On Monday this week, NASA updated this post to also include a copy of the Memorandum of Understanding signed by the US Department of Energy and NASA. So this idea is becoming more concrete, and that's a big deal because if we're serious about long-term lunar bases, habitats, science labs, and eventually using the moon as a stepping stone to Mars, we need power that doesn't disappear for 2 weeks at a time when the sun goes down. Of course, as soon as that word nuclear enters any story, look out, because it becomes instant bait for misinformation. That's where ground news really shines. I've been using it for years now because it does something special. It's a website and an app that lets me see the full spread of coverage in one place, check bias and factuality ratings, and spot what parts of the story might be getting overhyped or completely ignored, depending on where you're reading it. Follow along at ground.news/Marcus. When I pull up this story, I can instantly see how it's been covered across almost 130 articles picked up here alone, with less than 10% of those sources coming from the left, making this a potential blind spot for that side. Taking a deeper look at the sources, many focus on the science and technical challenges, and others on the political and budget impact of the new moon race. It is nice to see that in this case, 82% of the sources are high in their factuality, so if you ever want to know whether a headline is genuinely huge news or just framed to grab clicks, seeing it all broken down in this way makes that super easy to determine. The Nobel Peace Center even recently praised it as an excellent way to stay informed, avoid echo chambers, and expand your worldview. The great thing is they're not funded by driving a certain narrative. They're independent and subscriber funded, so give it a try. Right now, you can get the same plan that I am using for just $5 a month. Just visit ground.news/Marcus from the link in the description, or you can scan the QR code right there on screen. That's nearly half off, by the way, so if you're tired of one-sided news and want a better way to stay informed, check it out. Thank you, Ground News. Now, with all of that, we of course had this announcement on Monday by SpaceX. As you can see, they have officially acquired xAI. That had been rumoured over the past few weeks, but that is now confirmed and has been met with a lot of mixed feelings. The update on the website goes into a bunch of details into what this acquisition means for the future of SpaceX, but I know what you really want to know. Is SpaceX going to remain the company that inspired us all to continue pushing exploration to the moon, Mars, and beyond? It's a fair question because over the years we've seen the gigantic Starlink constellation grow to the point that SpaceX's revenue is already monstrous. You may recall recent posts about launching orbital data centers that would power and train AI models. One of the biggest issues with ground-based data centers, of course, is the negative effects that they have on the local electricity grid, which is stupidly, in many cases, pushing up the cost of power for consumers wanting to just, live and stuff. You then have the local environmental impact due to the vast amounts of water needed for cooling and where to spit out all of that largely useless waste heat. The argument for space-based data centers in the first place, which may seem like a staggeringly expensive process with no real opportunity for maintenance after launch, is that these will pretty much have constant, unfiltered solar power from the sun. In this way, huge investment into the ground energy production isn't required when you can just use the sun for free. Now, if at any point you thought the goal of sending 42,000 Starlink satellites into orbit was nuts, and that is still obviously in progress with them almost a quarter of the way there now, that has got nothing on this idea. SpaceX filed an application with the FCC at the end of January proposing a constellation of up to 1 million satellites. These would orbit between 500 and 2,000 kilometers in altitude. Yes, a neat vertically integrated approach to dominating the world of artificial intelligence. Probably hold off on your order of this book because we just seem to be along for the ride at this point. Regardless of whether you agree with these proposed space data centers or not, it's undeniable that this will take up a huge chunk of Starship's future launch cadence if it becomes reality. 1 million satellites is a mind-numbing amount of mass needed for orbit. Of course, as stated, SpaceX are aiming eventually for launches every hour carrying 200 tons per flight or millions of tons to orbit and beyond per year. They even mentioned that launching AI satellites from Earth is the immediate focus, so even to me this seems like science fiction, but technology is moving very quickly. It's like the first baby step of becoming a Kardashev-level civilization. This scale was proposed by a Soviet astronomer who suggested that the level of technological progress of a civilization is based on the amount of energy that it can harness. A Kardashev level 2 civilization is one that is able to use the total energy output of a star, so I think we've got quite a way to go yet. Just as my opinion, I don't think that we want to be throwing too many rare earth materials off-world, but of course, while the initial plans are rolling out with in-space propellant transfer systems being developed, Starship will also be taking massive amounts of cargo to the moon. Once a permanent presence exists there for scientific and manufacturing purposes, factories on the moon can also start manufacturing satellites. That, I'm sure, would quickly then expand to asteroid mining. From the moon, you can just use mass drivers to launch resources into space instead of needing gigantic starships to escape Earth's gravity all the time. So yeah, the argument here is that capabilities unlocked by making space-based data centers a thing will by default, I guess, allow us to expand out to colonize not just the moon, but Mars and then ultimately onward to other star systems. Assuming, of course, that we don't end up with Skynet in the meantime. I would love to know what you think about all of this. Now, the ginormous Space Launch System has been sitting on its pad at Slick 39B, and earlier this week it was finally time for the critical wet dress rehearsal to take place. The countdown began a little over 2 days prior to the opening of this simulated launch window, and they do it this way to make sure that all their procedures that run down to the big event work as expected. The ambient air in the SLS and Orion spacecraft was pumped full of nitrogen gas, which is an important step to prevent any sort of fire hazards during the fueling test. Finally, Monday morning arrived and the orange beast was go to begin propellant loading for the wet dress rehearsal. The propellant lines were getting chilled down and the liquid hydrogen and oxygen slowly began flowing into the rocket's core stage first, and a little over an hour after, they had begun to fill the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, or ICPS. To thermally condition the tanks, they first slow fill before transitioning to a more rapid flow, and that just prevents thermal shock and keeps the hardware safe. So, unfortunately, about 2 hours into the loading, they stopped pumping the hydrogen into the core stage after discovering a leak which was exceeding the allowable limits. Where though? Well, right at the tail service mast umbilical, and if you recall, the SLS for Artemis I suffered from a leak in the exact same region. After a bunch of troubleshooting, the team stopped the flow of liquid hydrogen into the core stage, allowed the interface to warm up for the seals to reseat, and adjusted the flow of the propellant. In the end, they decided to go ahead with filling the tank up entirely while managing the hydrogen concentration to keep within acceptable limits. A few more hours in, all of the tanks were successfully topped off and were being replenished as any of the cryogenic propellant boiled off. Now, NASA also faced some other minor issues. They took more time than expected to close and secure the hatch on the Orion spacecraft due to a small problem with Orion's hatch pressurization system. The launch team even had to work through some brief audio dropouts and camera anomalies, but engineers believed this was likely caused by the recent bout of unusually cold weather in central Florida. Finally, it was just 10 minutes into the simulated count as automated flight systems took control. They got right down to about 5 minutes left in the countdown before the ground launch sequencer automatically stopped the process due to, yes, a spike in the liquid hydrogen leak rate. That leak from hours ago had also terminated the wet dress rehearsal countdown. Obviously now those leak problems need to be addressed, and unsurprisingly after this result, the predicted launch date of Artemis II has been pushed into March. Remember, due to the lunar cycle needed, the launch window only lasts for a few days each month. Here is the window for March and April, so if we don't see the mission flying by March 11, it is obviously going to fall into early April instead. This also means the crew, Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Cook and Jeremy Hansen, have been pulled out of quarantine. Fingers crossed they have the leak issue resolved over the next week or two. Now, we have had an unusual Starlink mission this week with the Group 1732 mission that had launched from Slick 4E at Vandenberg on Monday morning. Notice the fairing here was again carrying another batch of Starship heat shield tiles stuck on there, so those experiments are still continuing. This layout here is different from the ones that we saw last week. It was booster 1071 flying for a staggering 31 times in this mission, which puts it just one less than the record holder booster 1067 that has done 32. After doing its part to send another batch of 25 Starlink satellites into space, the booster quickly made its way back to land on the drone ship Of Course I Still Love You. Some seriously smooth footage of the 31st landing there. Strangely, however, a few hours after the launch, SpaceX updated us with this post saying that although the Starlink satellites were deployed successfully, the second stage experienced an off-nominal condition during the preparation for its deorbit burn. The vehicle then performed as designed to successfully passivate the stage, and by passivate, that really just means that they've saved the second stage up there so that it is less of a risk. It's always best to have one second stage up there rather than many pieces, so yeah, they can even vent the propellant facing a specific direction to help partially deorbit, which is really neat, and in fact, that looks like what they did. As always, I highly recommend following Jonathan McDowell, who tracks this sort of thing beautifully, and as he said here, given this is in an orbit of 110 by 241 kilometers, it is going to end up re-entering quickly. Given that the perigee was as low as 110 kilometers, that is a pretty good hint that SpaceX was able to lower it down from about 250 kilometers while doing that venting. Originally, of course, there were a few other Falcon 9 missions scheduled in for the week, but SpaceX has been busy reviewing this data to determine the root cause of the deorbit burn issue before returning to flight. They've now just finished that investigation, so there should be another mission here launching shortly. Now, on Wednesday, a crane has been seen raised at Launch Complex 39A, and as you can see, they seemed to be working on the crew access arm to bring it down. You may recall that SpaceX is hoping to prioritise Falcon Heavy and Starship launches from this launch site, so we believe that this means that all Crew Dragon missions from now on will be limited to Slick 40. It'll be a little sad to see this arm that supported some of the most incredible human spaceflight missions of this decade removed for good. We had the first Demo 2 mission with Bob and Doug taking place here, all of the Axiom missions, Inspiration 4, Polaris Dawn, Frem 2 and all the other many NASA crew missions. Indeed, that crew access arm has given us some great memories, but, of course, we hope to see a Starship crew access arm at some point, so onward we go. We've got a few neat updates from VAST as they get closer to their first full Haven 1 mission. They've been doing full-scale life support testing for the small space station being finalised. They published these few images talking about their air revitalisation system checks all the way up to their acoustic mitigation. All of that is being done, of course, with their life support testing module. Along with that, we also have this neat update on Tuesday this week on the Haven demo mission still in orbit. VAST has now completed its initial perigee lowering manoeuvre to demonstrate the ability to perform a controlled deorbit. They had it firing up its orbital manoeuvring thrusters for about 14 minutes, which then lowered its perigee by roughly 170 kilometers. Again, the quality of the cameras on this mission are just amazing. If you watch the time-lapsed video, all the stats are right there as the manoeuvre was being performed. You might notice that the vehicle almost seems to oscillate a little right through this process. I imagine there is a corrective thruster just periodically reorienting the direction it is facing to keep everything in line through that burn. Very cool anyway, and you can see that they ended up with a perigee just under 340 kilometers. Now, I just thought that I'd mention that NASA's Interstellar Mapping and Acceleration Probe, or IMAP mission, is just this week beginning its 2-year science mission to explore and map the boundaries of our heliosphere. That's the protective bubble created by the solar wind that surrounds our solar system, and you might recall this launched back in September last year. Now we finally get to see those 10 scientific instruments on board start mapping out a comprehensive picture of all those high energy particles originating from the sun and elsewhere, magnetic fields in interplanetary space, and dust left from exploded stars in interstellar space. Through studying the diverse range of particles and the magnetic fields that guide them, IMAP will, we hope, provide new evidence about two of the most important factors in heliophysics. We need to know more about the charged particles from the sun and also how the solar wind interacts with interstellar space. Some of IMAP's data is already being fed into the IMAP Active Link for Real-Time system. What this does is give us near real-time observations of space weather headed towards Earth. This can then be used to issue advanced warnings and alerts for potential dangers, which will be super useful, especially during the Artemis II mission and obviously those on the International Space Station. This is actually pretty neat. If you head over to the site and flick through the solar wind and magnetic field data, you can see the blue line there, which is the magnetic field component, jumping around quite a lot. That's the sort of thing that becomes really interesting when we've got some strong aurora activity going on. I've dropped a link to that in the description if you want to jump in and have a tinker with it yourself. So that is it for the week, my friends. A lot of action already this early in the year. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit subscribe so we get to keep making them. If you have some more time to spend with us, help us out by checking out this video here next. Thanks for watching all this way through as always. I'll see you all in the next video.